Well, we're ready to now attach the top to the table. I've got a little cloth here to help protect the top. We'll put the top with the good side down. Make sure you put the good side down. Now, one thing I want to do is I want to make sure that I position the top to where the grain is running in the direction where there's two buttons. So I've got two buttons here and two buttons here, and the grain is running like this. The reason why is because the top, if it's going to move, can often move like this, that is cup in either one or the other direction. By having the two buttons, that helps stabilize it and keep it from cupping. It's oftentimes not going to move this way, so one button right here is fine in this direction. So two buttons here, two buttons there, grain running like this. Plus we've got our front. We know that our front here is right here on this side. So we'll want the grain running like this on the front. That may be something you may consider too when you're fixing to attach the top, is make sure that you have established which is your front, which is right here. I've got my front right there. But then also, if you have one particular grain pattern that you want to have towards the front, configure it in that way. The next step here is to make the top equidistant on the side, that is to have an even overhang all the way around. You could simply measure it. As I've mentioned in earlier videos, we talk about the fact that it's an 1 1/8" overhang. Another little trick is to use the buttons. The buttons are actually sized to where they are right about the exact width of the overhang. So my goal here is to make the base equidistant on either side so there's an even distance of overhang on the top. I'm feeling it here with the buttons, feeling for an even overhang on each side, and I like that. Now we can attach the buttons. You can put the buttons in place like this, and we'll attach a couple of the screws. Got these 1 1/2" by No. 8 screws. I don't feel like there's any need to actually pre-drill holes into the top. Walnut is a soft enough wood that we don't really have to worry about that. If this was hard maple, then I probably would pre-drill a hole into the top. And what I would want to do is drill that hole the diameter of the screw shank less the threads. So actually just the diameter of the actual shank without the threads. What I can do to kind of start this screw is just tap it in place. That helps set the screw and keep the top from moving around. You can actually put a little bit of wax on the screw. That helps the screw follow into the wood easier. We'll just take a screwdriver and screw these in. Try to hold this stable when you take a screwdriver and screw it in. Before putting the next one in, you may want to check it and make sure that it didn't move, because you do have a little bit of wiggle room still to be able to move it before you attach all of the buttons. That feels pretty good. One thing to keep in mind is you want to make sure that the screws are not too long. Make sure that you size the screws to the buttons. These are 1 1/2" screws, and I've already looked at them to make sure that the screw does not exceed the thickness of the top. The last thing you want is to screw the top to your workbench. And the last screw. I'd like to go over this one last time with a fine-tooth comb. That is some sandpaper, some fine sandpaper, and just look at the whole table, maybe go over the whole table with some 220 grit sandpaper, just sanding the surface. I'm going to apply an oil finish to this table, and I've found that the smoother the surface is when applying an oil finish, the better the finish is. So I'll actually sand it with some 220, then I can even go over it with some 320 grit sandpaper. That'll give it a nice, smooth surface prior to putting the oil on. So now that I've attached the top, let's look at our table. Now we're ready to apply a finish.